Anyways, thank you. I've been told to stay on time, so I'm not going to belabor the beginning, but as Eric said, I've worked with a number of cardiac interventionists over the years. Low back pain is a year...
Do you have questions, pre-questions? I'm sorry.
No, just post.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Low back pain is a universal experience. It is a very shared experience. 80% of you will have low back pain in your lifetime. And just to show how shared it is, one of the best pickup lines for one of my clients used to be in the bar, "Do you have back pain?" I always knew who he was dating because he sent them all to me, and he was very successful with that line. So it is a universal shared experience. What predicts back pain? Well, the insurers know. They put a rider on everyone who's ever had back pain. So 78% of people who've had back pain will have a recurrent episode of back pain. One of my goals here today is to reduce those statistics. So there are 4 stages of back pain. The first one is the warning, and it's the one that most of us ignore. It's where you get some pain, you get a little stiffness, you get a little tightness, and you go, oh, it'll just go away. And maybe it's just workout pain. But I can tell you, if you've been in your job for longer than 3 months, it is not workout pain. DOMS adapts within 3 months, delayed onset muscle soreness. So don't ignore it, because then it goes on to injury. Then we get recovery, which is great. And then we have 2 options of what I've seen. You either get healthy or you go on to chronic pain and stenosis. So injury with the spine is pretty simple. It's a pretty simple structure as far as I'm concerned. So it does typically 3 things. It herniates a disc, it irritates a facet, or you pinch a nerve. 95% recovery rate, that is within 3 months, but that, I'm talking about 3 months of pain, possibly 3 months where you're not at work. And as I keep saying, a 78% recurrence rate. So why do I keep pushing the 78% recurrence rate? Because the problem with repeated trauma is Wolff's Law. Wolff's Law is bone conforms to the stresses placed on it, and what do we get? Stenosis. Now, you guys know about stenosis from a different perspective, but from the bone, we get the central canal stenosis, where it changes from round to more trefoil, or you can get it at the lateral recess, where the nerve root goes out, or the foramen as well. However, stenosis is not inevitable, okay? Bone conforms to stresses placed on it, and most of my clients can quote Wolff's Law, because one of the things we're looking at doing is reducing the stresses they place on their bones to stop the bones from adapting. So let's tell a little story. You got 2 people here who has spinal stenosis. I think most of you would say the one on the left. So what is the cardinal symptom of spinal stenosis? It is neurogenic claudication, leg pain when you walk. But what's the cardinal sign of spinal stenosis? A walker. So our examinations do not pick up spinal stenosis. It is basically the people walk into your office with a walker. They either have something that you treat or they have something that I treat, which is spinal stenosis. Now, the guy on the right doesn't have spinal stenosis. He's 90. He's carrying his 35-pound great-grandchild. And I want you to notice he's standing. How many 90-year-olds do you see standing straight up carrying 35 pounds? You might see them sitting, but you don't see them standing. His story is written. He passed away a few years ago. That's my dad. And he passed away at the age of 94, and he walked a mile a day till 93. And he gave 3-hour lectures standing at the War Museum. But he hurt his back in his 30s and 40s. He didn't go on to spinal stenosis. The guy on the left is in his 50s. His story is not yet written. The good news is you're not going to look like that. That's congenital stenosis with the syringomyelia. So it's much more complex than the degenerative ones. But if I haven't got your attention yet, there's a longitudinal study out of Japan that shows that the angle between your L5 vertebrae and your S1 will predict whether or not you're going to go into a nursing home and need care. So I'm pretty obsessed on posture, and I think all of us want independence. I think that one got its effect. Okay, so I went out and I hung out with Eric in the lab. And so we're going to look a little bit at your analysis of risk, your biomechanics at the cath lab, and your muscle coordination in the cath lab. So I'm going to leave you with 2 videos that I'm not going to go over on activation strategies before you do a procedure, and something on finding your neck posture, because this is a back pain talk, but I gave you something on necks anyways. I'm also going to give you a risk analysis grid and something we're using in Ontario called the Core Back and Neck Tool, which gives you strategies on the more acute and the early warning care of back pain. So first of all, why do we injure? It's pretty simple. Force exceeds tissue capacity. So you can see a few injuries that are going to happen there, whether it's concussion or whether it's his neck, but something's going to happen in that one. But is the number one cause of back pain trauma? No. The number one cause of back pain is repetitive and sustained stresses. I hear you hurt your back when you lift a muffin. That is not a trauma. Most causes of low back pain are actually unidentifiable. You try, but it's not there. They are sustained positions and repetitive stresses over time. So, learning to work effortlessly reduces the strain on facets, discs, muscles. Now, why have I got a picture of Roger Federer up there besides the fact that Eric and I both like tennis? He has very low injuries. He's the old man of tennis, still wins Grand Slams, and where does he hurt himself? Playing with his kids, not on the court. So, we reduce injury by knowing when to make change, by analyzing risk, and knowing how to make change. So, when should you make change? When you start to feel the early symptoms, a bit of pain, or what Dr. Rampersad over at UHN calls prodromal symptoms. A little bit of stiffness, a little bit of discomfort, okay? Analyzing risk, I'm gonna give you a grid for that, and how to make change, biomechanics, and physiology and motor coordination. So, risk analysis, MDF. If there's carpenters in this room, MDF means something completely different to you than it means to me. MDF to me means magnitude, duration, and frequency. But I find it helps for people to take it to the common. So I've done a risk analysis grid, and I use this whenever I do risk analysis, and on the top is your MDF, as well as a symptoms one, because if you've got symptoms, these will all be in your handouts afterwards. If you've got symptoms, that's important. Down the left are common activities. So I went into your lab, and I filled in your risk analysis grid. And wherever you see red is where the risk analysis is. So to summarize that, your risk for magnitude is your lead apron. Your risk for duration is prolonged standing, prolonged bending forward, prolonged reaching and twisting. Your frequency and duration is you use the computer screen a lot, and you have two challenges. And you may have more than this. I was only there for 2 hours. So your patient location is a problem, and I've certainly found out your x-ray location is a bit of a challenge. So, order for change. I always start with biomechanics. If things get good, I stop at biomechanics. If they don't, I go to physiology and motor coordination. If that's not enough, I go to strength. So, on your biomechanical change, we're going to do an exercise to show you how this works. So we're going to do a rate of perceived exertion on a 1 to 10, and your goal in life is to have your rate of perceived exertion at less than 4, unless you're at the gym. And when you're at the gym, it should be above 4, you're dogging it. But in life, it should be under 4. So what I'd like everyone to do is stand up. You've got, for this one, we are going to use paper. And you've got handouts on your table, so you've got a grid that looks like this. And you're going to rate your rate of perceived exertion, so 1 is low, 10 is high, on 3 common activities. Okay. The first activity is I want your feet side by each, and I want you to lean forward. I don't want you to bend, I just want you to lean. And I want you to think about what your RPE is on that. Is it a 1, is it a 10, and mark it down. Yeah, rate of perceived. Yeah, start to lean forward and feel how much effort you put into leaning forward. Is it a minor amount of effort or is it a lot amount of effort? It'll be 1 to 10. It'll become clearer when we do the next one. 10 is hardest. Yeah. Okay, second one. I want you to bend forward. I want you to lean and bend. And I want you to feel, that should feel a different level of exertion than the other one. Might be more, might be less. Get knees straight. And your final one I want you to do is to put one foot forward. And I want you to just lean, not bend, with one foot forward. And it should be a very different sense of how much effort it needs to do those. So while you're thinking about that, I'd like you to open your poll everywhere. And do we have the poll everywhere on the screen? Yeah.
I need like a standard, like when I was like 15, like, you know what I mean?
You have to close the heat poll. Now, we're going to switch there.
Okay, so you're now going to rank it. And I want you to put the easiest one at the top and the hardest one at the bottom. Drag the 3 lines and put the easiest one at the top and the hardest one at the bottom. So, as you're doing it, that's right. Okay, so yay, you guys got it. The easiest one is putting a foot forward. The hardest one is bending forward. And what my point here is that simple changes will change the amount of effort that you use in the cath lab. So let's go off that screen. Okay. And those are my rate of perceived effort and then the ranking. So biomechanically, we want to reduce stress. So one of the things, and you may be doing all of these things, and I'm going to go through it quickly because it's biomechanics and you're going to have it for you afterwards. So the 2-piece apron tends to have less stress than the 1-piece apron. The closer you can have your table to your center of mass, the easier it is. So taking the time to adjust the table will help you a lot. I understand some of you set up your patient reaching across them. If you can, do it on the ipsilateral side, not on the contralateral side, because it's harder. If you can't, you can't. Straighten up frequently. We often stay bending forward when we don't need to stay bending forward. And if you can, lean against your table. It reduces the effort.
One of the issues we have also is we have to raise the table a lot because of radiation exposure. I don't know if you noticed it, Eric mentioned that to you, but people who are shorter have to, it's more stress for them because the table sometimes has to be raised to reduce your radiation.
Right.
The challenge is short. They're vertically challenged.
Yeah. So we would have to look at that one more specifically. I mean, the ideal would be to have a platform to work on, but that might not work in your situation.
It would be ideal to have the proper, if you have to stand on a platform or something like that, right? I think
Yeah.
that actually would be ideal. You'd have a movable platform, right? So, because that is an issue.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll put in the requisition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, it works for you. Okay. So whenever you can, use a wider base of support and keep your torso in line with the activity. But this is where I found the challenge with the X-ray beam, is I put my foot right under where the X-ray beam would have been. So to do that, what I did is I moved my 1 foot forward. So I was a wider base of support with my body rotated in the direction of the patient. But the problem is this may cause twisting. And if you know anything about back care, you're never supposed to twist, right? No, bunk. How can you play tennis if you never twist it? We have to twist. We're designed to twist, okay? So when we twist, we need to use more efficient motor patterns. So again, I'd like you to do another poll. So your poll's up. Okay, next poll up while we're getting there. You're going to think about this while they're bringing the poll up, and you are going to turn to the right. And when you turn to the right, I want you to think about whether you lead with your, just a sec here, you're turning to the right, if you lead with your right shoulder back, or if you feel like you lead with your left shoulder forward. Just where do you feel the turn initiates from? And then you can poll Don't be influenced. Go by what you feel. All right, so I'm going to tell you this one you got wrong. Okay, you should be leading with your left shoulder forward. And stay standing for a moment, if we can go back to my screen. Okay, when you twist, your ideal twisting muscles are your oblique abs. They are good muscles. They are big muscles. So if you lead with your left shoulder forward, and
Picture up there.
that's your picture? If you lead with your left shoulder forward and imagine resistance, you should feel your obliques kick in. If you lead with your right shoulder back, you are using those scrawny little useless rhomboids. So if you can use a big muscle to create a movement, physiologically it is more efficient than using a small muscle. Yes. Good. All right, so have a seat. If you have back pain, despite doing good ergonomics, you've done everything, like maybe the table is a height that you can't adjust, and you've improved your biomechanics, then I look at reducing your physiological demand with better muscle coordination. So, one more thing, your cardiac cath lab. You have sustained standing and bending forward. So, I want you now to do one last thing. I want you to stand forward, do exactly what we did on the first one. Come stand up. And you are going to do the one that we did at the beginning, which is just leaning forward. And I want you to feel what you use to hold yourself up. What stops you from falling? Is it your buttocks? Is it the back of your thighs? Is it the front of your thighs? Is it your calves? Is it your shin? Is it your back muscles? Is it your abs? And now while you're doing that, I want you to think about which is working hardest, because you're going to give whatever's working hardest a 3. And I want you to mark your 3s. So, sorry, not on the poll, it's on the paper. Or you can, if you want to use the poll, I haven't brought the poll up. Okay, so mark it as a 3. We didn't find this worked as well on the poll. We tried it. So put your 3s down. Okay? Yeah. And here are the right answers. Okay? How many of you used your butt? Not even half the room. How many of you used your toes? Your feet? Yeah. Yeah, lots of that. Okay? You need to work on your motor coordination. So, yeah. You can have a seat again. Studies have shown that people who create balance through their feet are at risk for back pain. So your support should be coming from your pelvis muscles. So just to finish off,
Well, essentially you're saying use the biggest muscles that you have, right?
your glutes, your abs, a little bit of quads, yeah. You know, on a percentage basis. So the muscles to invest in are your support muscles. Your transverse abdominis is a universal essential core supporter. The other abs, they're beautiful, but they move you. They do not support you. Your glute max is your essential support for leaning forward. You want to get it working and you want to use it. Your glute med, we call it a hip abductor, its big job is support and standing. So I've given you a video on activation strategies. We won't go through it. It's about a minute that you can do as a warm-up before you start your procedures, all in the lab. I've also given you something to find your neck posture, and as I say to people, you want a neutral neck, so the distance from most people's tip of their nose to their chin, when you're in a good posture, is absolutely equal to the chin to the sternal notch. And there's a video talking about that. So I have my clients during the day just check, where's their head? My point is simple biomechanical and physiological change reduce strain. You want to make change when you feel a warning. So you don't need to be perfect. Make change when you feel pain, discomfort, stiffness, and don't mistake it for DOMS. Evaluate a high rate of RPE, and if you feel that your RPE is over 4 in your everyday life, doesn't matter whether it's cath lab or doing something else, if it's not a sport, your RPE should be under 4. And then you should evaluate your risk based on my risk grid, and my risk grid you can use for anything. These are 2 websites where you can look at things related to acute care, and thank you.
I think that was the best lecture.
Should we take just a couple, 2 questions and then we'll let you go to break, okay? Go ahead.
So,
Mic on, please.
so in the Canada,
You can see in the picture that you showed, there's different types of mats we have on the floor. There's other things. A lot of times, we have some of the things that are there that are supposed to help, other things that just get in the way. What are some of the tools? Like, do the comfort mats or any of that kind of stuff add to this? Obviously, doing all of the positioning things are important, but sometimes we're in a crazy pose that you have to keep for a longer time. What are the things that may benefit us in the lab to try and minimize the insanity of what we sometimes have to do?
So standing, absolutely, there is support for the shock absorbing mats. Okay, they're used a lot in industry, and there is support for them. They vary, so you can look at that. The other thing that I would definitely do is make sure that you make the height of the table as ideal as you can, okay? And then I would think about, can you do this using the bigger muscles? There are some things that are just awkward. There's no way to pull something out of the trunk of the car with good ergonomics, okay? And so then I'm like, start thinking about what you're engaging, that your support is coming from your abs and your glutes in those situations. And then if you can not sustain it as much, come out of it whenever you can. Okay?
What about footwear, Maureen? Anyway, the clogs or shoes or tennis shoes, a lot of people say.
Again, I think the shoes would come in with the absorption. You can get things that have the more of the absorptive cushion in it, or the absorption can be in the mat itself. Obviously, it's easier to control your own shoe wear.
Or it doesn't matter with the arch and all that. You know, some people try to exaggerate the arch.
You know what, there's not a lot on that unless it, if you felt that, because I mean, some of you might know the Masai barefoot technology. You were basically on it was like on a half a tennis ball, and you're supposed to wear those all day. I don't know how anyone did that. But if it helps you to get into your pelvic muscles, I would support it. But if you don't feel that change, I think it's just a nicety along the way.
If you could recommend one exercise that you would do daily outside the lab, like at home in the morning when you wake up or at the end of the day, which one would it be?
Walking.
Walking.
Walking at between, walking 3 kilometers, between 8 and 11 minute kilometer. So 30 minutes, 3 kilometers. We had a study out of Australia just in August that shows that your glycosaminoglycan increases in your disc if you walk at that speed.
How much of a difference does weight make?
It actually so far doesn't. The studies on weight, which come out of Kulwicki's lab out of Yale, show that it's sudden increases in weight. So the body can't control a sudden increase. Now, his definition of sudden increase was 2 kilos in 3 years. I can do that on a bad weekend. So it's basically, can the body support its body weight? And so that's what makes a difference. But after injury, what happens, so again, a recent study came out that back pain goes away at 40% of function. So a lot of people's pain has gone away, but they haven't restored their function and strength. So then weight makes a difference because you've got less strength and more body weight. And then it becomes a compounding problem.
To what extent can you come into our workplace, Cath Labs, and observe an operator and analyze what he or she is doing right or wrong and make recommendations? Can you do that through pure observation?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to do a lot of this by mimicking in my office, and then I usually start by sending me photographs, and then I finish by going into the lab or into a situation. So I just escalate it as it needs to escalate. If I'm working the one-on-one, I also then will look at your motor system and go, yeah, I want you to do this, but you can't do it. Like some of you can't support your balance without your feet. You need to do it. So the first thing I'd want to do is step back and say, let's activate your hip support, then let's look at your lab, because you're not going to do it right. And until that happens, for those of you who didn't have it, do your biomechanics, because that's your safety right now when your motor system isn't supporting you.
Is there any role for sitting down, even for a few seconds or a few minutes? You know, sometimes we have 4-6 hour cases, and you can have a second operator preparing the device or getting a wire or something, and you can sit down for 30 seconds, a minute. Is there any role for that?
Right, so absolutely, when it comes to physio...
For attending.
Yeah, the old adage is a change is as good as a rest is absolutely there. So you want to change your physiological demand, and you guys understand it more. You don't want anaerobic metabolism. Your body starts to adapt as a result of that. So if you can change to start to use different muscle groups in it by changing from standing to sitting, you then create physiological recovery, right? It's like the 100-meter dasher stops, and then he runs it again, but he doesn't keep running it. So if you can make those changes, you can create recovery.